Welcome back, my spookies. Tonight we're stepping off the clean, well-lit road and heading into old places. The places where the trees remember, where the school bell rings at midnight, where a hill can have a name like a joke and still mean every terrible word. These are stories about warnings ignored, doors opened, old magic waking up under the roots, and people who go looking for legends only to discover the legends have been looking back. Somewhere in the woods, something black and hungry is spreading from leaf to claw to bone. Somewhere behind razor wire and ivy-covered brick, the dead are learning how to serve a new master. Somewhere in the Pacific Northwest, a strange cry rolls through the trees, and another curious fool takes one step too many down the wrong side of the hill. And through it all, there's that very human mistake we keep making. We think we can explain the monster. We think we can name it. We think we can write it down, shoot it, freeze it, pray it away, or drag it into the light. But some things are older than fear. Some things know how to hide inside folklore. Some things wear human faces until hunger peels away. So get comfortable and make sure you're subscribed, because there's a brand new scary story right here on WeeklySpooky every single Wednesday. Now, let's get this show on the road. New Year's Evil, a paranormal thriller from the case files of Caroline Quinn by Mike Ashkewe. New Year's Eve, 2012. End of the world, or so I hear. Yeah, right. It should be a time where you reflect on the year and how you've grown and what you should be grateful for, blah, 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 sentimental bullshit. I, on the other hand, loved going out for drinks with the girls. Pick up a guy or girl, whoever looks fun, and frankly, party on. This year is not going to be like that, or at least this story won't end up with me losing my shoes and doing the walk of shame into a 7-Eleven for a Slurpee on New Year's morning. Instead, you get me, your favorite Ghoul School graduate and recently instituted federal agent, Caroline Quinn, the government's own supernatural badass. We're called troubleshooters, and there aren't a lot of us. In my graduating class, there were maybe 5 others like myself, a blend of the superpowered and supernatural, aka the government-sponsored freak shows. Government goons who fight real-life monsters, the kind of stuff that was once only found in books and fairy tales. Cool, huh? However, that's not what's important. This part is actually pretty cool and not many know about it. Ghoul School. What's that, you ask? Well, back when the world, changed and suddenly superpowers and the supernatural just randomly started to coexist in the mid-1950s. So now we have assholes who can fly and assholes who suck blood, who can also fly, but it's complicated. Long story short, spandex fights Dracula and even the occasional Frankenstein-like things. We call them Frankies for short. Weirdly more common than you might think, and it's usually pharmaceutical companies. Anyway, so my mom was a vampire and my dad wasn't. But he was into the whole undead thing. Vamps are sexy, I guess. No, just gross, but I digress. My dad is what they call a ghoul, but not like an undead zombie thing, more like a bonded to vampiric host sort of thing. It sounds less fucked up if I use the science terms I learned at the academy. 9 months later, and I'm sure stuff that would render years of therapy if I lingered on it, I was born. So one night back when I was 12, a couple of bad-looking motherfuckers who looked like the Men in Black showed up for a chat. They pointed an ultraviolet shotgun at my mom,
and pistol-whipped my dad and said, "We know your kid is special. We're taking her, and if all goes nice and smooth, she'll see you when she graduates from our little school. Do anything but say that your daughter is on scholarship to a private school, and you'll be dissected. Am I clear?" That was my life for 6 years at Ghoul School. It never officially had a name, but all of us kids nicknamed it Ghoul School. And that's where I'm headed, and it happened to be in the dullest place you can imagine. Ohio. I know, right? I got a call from a friend, Sammy, who works at the school, and said that I needed to come home, but it absolutely had to be tonight. He sounded panicked, and that was not what I knew of Sammy. December 31st, 2012. This is not what I had planned for New Year's Eve this year. I had actually had a date tonight. She was a nice girl I met at the academy after I graduated. Her name was Rianne. She was cute, and I was totally into her. Instead, I drove through the backwoods of Ohio on New Year's and investigated something weird. It could be something, or it could be nothing entirely. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Didn't need to be a super or something else to know something was going to go down at my old school. I was a few hours out from campus, near Youngstown. Sammy had said that he noticed some of the newer kids were acting weirder than normal, and something felt off. He'd mentioned that one day one of their cell phones was confiscated, and it had very threatening messages, and not something as fun as a school shooting either. No, seriously, how the fuck is that still a thing in 2012? Especially since now the kids can literally pack as much firepower into their own fists as some militaries. I guess I should be thankful someone who can melt people with their eyes hasn't had a bad day in PE. Yet. Way of the world, I guess. Still sucks, though. Anyway, Sammy had mentioned a name, and that immediately set off alarm bells. Yasu. When things got weird in the world, things got weird. It wasn't just vampires and shit that became real. It was things that were like nuclear threat level worse. Demons, specters, and rumor has it even death gods. Things got understandably bizarre in the post-changed world, but things that literally could rise from the grave and command armies of the undead, I'm not a fan of, even if I share some of that supposed supernatural blood running in my veins. Part of my occult schooling involved learning about what new world I was a part of, but also the part that I would protect it and draw a paycheck at the same time. Get some great education, learn rules, laws, and regulations, and then privately enforce the law for Uncle Sam and protect the country, and even the world at large. It's a lot less cool than it sounds, but no student loans to pay back, so bonus? Yasu was some long-forgotten god from somewhere in Asia, and probably for good reason. A death cult that was left out of most history books and written off as myth by many. Now, there's not an unreasonable possibility that this thing was potentially returning for a comeback tour in 2012. Great timing, if I do say so myself. As a favorite cartoon of mine once said, he makes Gozer look like Little Mary Sunshine. Clearly, I'm in for a fun time if he's right, but I am so praying this is just a bunch of edgelords trying to look cool in a school full of weirdos. This is great, isn't it? A dipshit with a Twitter account thinks they can summon great value Cthulhu. Sammy knew something was up, but didn't want to get the kids in harm's way. Call me up and hopefully come in quickly, quietly, and do it before Uncle Sam decides to use all necessary force. The school had security, some superpowered individuals of their own, but something feels wrong. You should go back to your old school to say, "Hey, what's up? Let's grab a drink." Not me, though. I get to spend my New Year's Eve potentially stopping the resurrection of a death god. Or I break up some dorky kid's New Year's Eve party, which was their ticket into someone's pants for a night. Save the world or cockblock someone. Fuck. Please let this be a false alarm and just be someone overreacting to some kid trying to sound cool. I suppose on the bonus side of all this, I can stop by the old cafeteria and see if they still make the best tuna sandwich in Ohio, if I can make it there in time. Not exactly how I envisioned ringing in the new year. I should be getting drunk and getting laid, but here we are. Go me, right? It's about 10 p.m. when I finally arrive at the school. Big, expensive, and like Oprah and Martha Stewart designed the campus. It was pretty in a weird, artificial sort of way, but definitely doesn't give off super secret government institution for superpowers vibes. You'd think someone built an Ivy League school in the middle of the woods, and on one hand, you're right, except it's fully razor wire enclosed and has armed patrols near its grounds. Definitely missed dinner, though. The cafe closed hours ago. I wasn't even checked by guards when crossing over the perimeter. Okay, that's not normal. Calling Sammy's cell and all I get is voicemail. I'm definitely not liking this. Parking in the visitor's lot, I step out into the cold December air. I look around the empty school grounds and I can hear music coming from somewhere close. I don't see anyone around, though. No guards, no kids, and definitely no one in charge. The parties should be happening in the dorms with the older kids. Gotta keep whatever damage happens to a minimum tonight. I guess I'm going non-lethal. Tasers, pepper spray. I also have my abilities. Super strength, speed, durability, beyond the means of mere mortals at least. And I can see in the dark most of the time. I also heal super quickly, should something be able to hurt me. I can shrug off most types of damage unless it comes from a supernatural or superpowered force, and it's pretty reasonable to assume that I'll run into some kind of trouble tonight. At the very least, I'm probably going to ruin my new winter coat, which I bought myself for Christmas. Wouldn't be a government operation without some cool toys, though. Director James Carlson, the new guy at the Department of Paranormal Researches, made sure we always had options in our field assignments. Now that's the kicker here, though. This isn't a sanctioned operation. This is so off the books that if I get caught or this makes the newspaper somehow, I am likely going to end up in some deep, dark cell in a prison where not even God could save me, unless he had proper security clearance. A lot is riding on this to keep it quiet, safe, and, above all, make sure no one gets hurt who doesn't need to. Maybe on second thought I better sling the toys and just keep it to pure non-lethals and stuff I can conceal in my purse or under my jacket. I'll take the taser and the spray, nice and tight. Don't want to draw too much attention to myself, but a 6-foot blonde who doesn't exactly dress conservatively is bound to raise a few eyebrows if I get spotted. I stop myself from breathing and focus all of my attention on listening to the environment around the school grounds. Focusing all my supernatural senses and just listening for real signs of life. Talking, movement, fucking anything that doesn't belong. A moment passes and I hear something in the dorms across the parking lot. I carefully isolate the sound from the music that's pounding and almost overwhelming my senses. This is deliberate. This music is covering something up, or is a part of it. A low murmur in a language I don't recognize, but I know it's bad news. It sounds like a group of voices are chanting or singing something deeply weird. Guess it's time to go. I feel weird leaving behind all the weapons in the car, in case I run into something a little harder to kill than some gifted weirdo with who knows what powers. I don't feel good leaving behind my actual handgun, but I'd rather not accidentally shoot through a wall and hurt someone. I briskly walk across the lot and head towards the courtyard in front of the school dorms. A lot of memories come flooding back as I cross the yard. I smile briefly as I look at one particular tree. That tree is where I kissed my first boyfriend, Dan. He was all right, but it was his sister who was really into me, and she and I dated for a few semesters. Surprisingly, Dan was cool about it because he wanted his sister, Lori, to be happy. They were good kids. It's too bad they didn't make it to graduation day. I miss them. A schoolyard fight went wrong, and one of the other freak shows decided to use their pyrokinetic abilities to burn them to cinders. School security didn't waste any time in putting down the offender in spectacular fashion. Security Officer Franklin Wick, aka Boyle, used his superpowers to liquefy the water inside the attacker and turned them into a bloody puddle. Fights at Ghoul School could get cataclysmic real fast if security didn't step in. I saw one kid who was partially a gargoyle get torn apart by the school's enhanced guard dogs. It wasn't pretty, and it put us in line pretty quick. The blood spatter wasn't something you could easily forget. There wasn't enough of Dan and Lori to bury. I don't even know if their parents know what really happened. A small tree is planted in the courtyard with a plaque that reads, "May they never be forgotten as we fight forward." I don't know how many died over the course of the school's history, but it's more than a few, but less than a fuck-ton. The government spends a lot of money to protect its investments. Not all kids who are either superpowered, gifted, or supernaturally inclined end up here, but it's enough to make sure it's protected. The United States stands on the front line of this weird occult war and tends to identify the most gifted individuals per its population. Most other nations try to keep those numbers quiet. The US likes to wave its supernatural superhero dick around like a grinning idiot kid who found his dad's gun. Still, there are too many. But that's why I'm here. Maybe I can stop something bad before it really gets going, and somebody else gets hurt. I know it won't bring back Dan and Lori, but yeah, if I could do the right thing, then I absolutely should. Save the world, right? I'll call Sammy's phone one last time before I enter the dorms and hope he picks up. It rings and rings and rings, and then straight to voicemail. I pocket my phone and walk up the stone steps to the dorms. If Sammy is anywhere, it's probably here since he's one of the resident advisors and is probably in the resident advisor's office or in his own suite on the 4th floor. I creak open the double doors and enter the front area of the dorms. It's loud but unnaturally still at the same time. Weird, loud music echoes over the PA systems, and even some of the interior lights are flashing on and off, as if in time with the music. Well, this one just jumped up on the weird shitometer. The front desk is empty as expected, but that may actually work to my advantage. I hop over the desk and thankfully don't tear the ass out of my jeans as I do. The security system is still open and active, and I have a whole suite of cameras across the entire building to look in on. Examining multiple cameras across the 4 floors, and almost immediately I come across the bad news I've been expecting. The 4th floor is filled with people, and some do not look very friendly. It looks like almost all the students and staff have been subdued and are tied up lining the hallways of the 4th floor. Gags and ropes, and some are covered in a weird green goo that I've never seen before. This night just keeps getting better, doesn't it? I see a group of about 6 of them in long, dark robes, being led by a guy in skinny black jeans and a Christmas sweater. Wonderful. A gaggle of goofy wannabe cultists and a dorky Hans Gruber type. He even has the cutest little bit of facial hair, trying to look like Alan Rickman. Just as I'm sitting here giggling to myself, an icicle comes flying out of the darkness and impacts the wall behind my head and explodes into painful icy shards. Before I can even register the shock of the first impact, a flurry of ice spears comes flying at the desk and at me. I throw myself to the floor under the desk and hear more impacts. Oh, fuck me, I quietly whisper to myself as I can hear more hits. The desk is made of heavy wood, but it won't last forever, and I'll have to move. Time to go to work then. I peek around the corner and see if I can spot where the attacks are coming from. My eyesight adjusts to the lighting conditions, and I can see a small shape at the far end of the lobby, hiding behind one of those big, comfy chairs. I can't make out any distinct features, though, but I know they're alone. I can hear just one heartbeat besides my own, and it's beating so fast it's like a rapper's backing track. Hey, could you please stop throwing shit at me for 5 seconds? I yell from behind the desk and prepare to sprint from my position. If I can distract them for just a moment, I can use that supernatural speed and close the gap and not catch an ice spear in the head. I mean, there is a reasonable chance I'd shrug it off due to my own gifts, but just because you're tough doesn't mean you're reckless. Another impact, and this time I can see the ice penetrate right beside my face. I know it's time to move. I thrust my body forward and move across the room in the blink of an eye, and at the last second I use the chair as a place to jump off and land behind it. Training kicks in, and I'm now in combat mode, and it all happens almost by instinct and sheer will alone. I sweep my leg low and knock my opponent over with tremendous force against the wall. Moving into close range, arms fly forward, and I throw all my strength into pinning their arms while pushing my weight onto them and holding them to the floor. Looking down at my opponent for a second, and I see. It's a kid. She looks frightened and terrified beyond reason. She's an Asian girl who couldn't be more than 14, and that's maybe a stretch. She looks up at me in pure fear and closes her eyes, fully expecting me to end her, right here and right now. I'm not a monster. I try to tell myself that before I go to sleep at night. I put my hand over her mouth firmly. Look, kid, I think we got off on the wrong foot. If I let you go, will you tell me what the fuck is happening around here? She nods, and I can feel some, but not all, of the tension leave her body. I release some of the grip I have on her and let go of my hold on her mouth. Who are you? She meekly asks. My name is Caroline, and I used to be a student here. I'm here to help. They killed Mr. Reeves. They killed Ms. Simmons. They even killed Lunch Lady Maria. They turned the rest of the staff into monsters, the kid stammered out, then started to cry. Mr. Reeves was also known as Sammy Reeves. Sammy is dead, or at least according to her. I'll deal with this later, but right now, we've got bigger problems. I know how to fight monsters, terrorists, and about 7 different types of zombies, but I don't know how to deal with a kid crying. Okay, look, I'm also a federal agent, and I'm like you, but I figured you guessed that already. What do you mean, monsters? We sat down for a few minutes in the darkness and talked, and what I heard I didn't like. It seems about 2 days ago, things started getting weird, and then people started dying. She told me about strange creatures that tore the security teams apart, and they looked like something out of a horror movie. Green corpse-like monsters, covered in slime, and their touch that seemed to rot in an instant. Well, this definitely narrows it down. Rots, servants of death gods, corpses reanimated by the will of death and powered by the souls of the damned near where they are animated. Usually found in Europe, but more recently on modern battlefields. The unfortunate consequence of war, I'm afraid. Tougher than typical zombies, and had a pleasant side effect of a death touch that basically putrefied you. It's quick, but about one of the most unpleasant ways to die you can imagine. What's your name, kid? Anna Wu. They call me Slush. I'm not good with my powers. You're the first person I've ever successfully used them on. I chuckle at that. Well, to be fair, you didn't land a hit, Anna. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were one of Gary's goons, and I panicked. I'm guessing Gary is the asshole in the Christmas sweater. The others in the robes must be the rots under his control. Anna stopped crying and nodded. He killed my roommate, Sarah. She tried to stop him, but Gary's monsters... Her voice trailed off. I can guess that the rots touched her, and she likely died quickly, but painfully, being rotted from the inside out. God damn, I can't save everyone, but that is no way to die, especially for a kid. Is that how you got away? I didn't want to ask, but I had to know. She protected me while I ran away. I couldn't help her, so she told me to run and hide. Any idea why Gary is doing this? You don't just try to resurrect a death god on New Year's Eve 2012 unless you have a really good reason, or you're some nihilistic little fuck from Tumblr. No, but I know he talks to the dead. He transferred in a few weeks ago from out of the country. An exchange student from South America. I've got a few theories on why, and none of them good or even conclusive at this point. Could be anything from your typical I want to destroy the world twirly mustache to some kind of misguided religious belief, or, my personal favorite, crazy as a shithouse rat, as my dad used to say. All right, cool. So, I got, let me see, a crazy kid who can talk to the dead with about 6 rots under his sway, the resurrection of Yasu likely at hand, and hostages of all shapes and sizes. You know, some girls want to go out and have drinks on New Year's Eve, but instead I get dragged into Caroline and the Apocalypse. Not exactly Dick Clark's Rockin' New Year's Eve at Times Square, but I'm sure I'll find a way to bring a little life to this Undead Ghoul Fest. Next year, I am definitely turning off text messages and going someplace sunny. Maybe Disney World. I want my mouse ears. I glance at my watch. It's 11:48, and if I'm going to make a move, it has to be now. I'm wondering how useful my new friend Anna is going to be in a fight, especially if things get messy. Not like I have a choice. There's no time to call backup. If I don't solve this problem quickly, then the world won't be around for too much longer. So I need a plan and kick the door down, so to speak. Maybe really fast to kill myself and run the clock out on planet Earth. I can't just pull a Die Hard and expect to survive. I have to think tactically and less like a video game or a comic book. I need a plan B. Wait. Light bulb moment here. I head over to the front desk area and start looking at those camera monitors. We can take out this asshole by going into his blind spots. Yeah, we're going to get this guy and we're going to make goddamn sure he doesn't see us coming. There are 2 staircases with entrances up where Gary and his rots are, and only one of them is currently guarded. Looks like we have our blind spot, but how do we take advantage of it and move them away from the hostages? Well, maybe I can pull a Die Hard here. Hey Anna, I have a crazy idea, but I'll need your help. Tell me, do you have fine enough control of your abilities that you can super cool the air? The girl looked at me, confused for a moment, and seemed to think pretty hard for a second, but nodded at me. Yeah, it was one of the first things I learned to do. My parents didn't have an AC unit, so they'd ask me to do it, but more often than not, I'd freeze the house. Cute, a living air conditioning unit. Save a few bucks anywhere you can, right? If she doesn't become a superhero, then she'll be a blast at parties for cold drinks. Okay, maybe this will work after all. Looked at the monitors again, and it seemed like the hostages were relatively safe for the moment. The rots seemed to be guarding a door at the end of the main hallway, so likely the rec room on the 4th floor. Unfortunately, that is the one camera whose feed is currently dark, and I couldn't see anything beyond a sea of static. Fortunately, the front desk had the other component of my plan right there, smiling at me with a large yellow sticky note proclaiming, "Do not touch." The thermostat. Anna, so here's the game plan, and I can't do it without your help. I'm gonna have you super cool the air in the elevator, and I'm gonna fuck with the thermostat. Okay. Why? Science, motherfucker. Instant fog cloud that leaves cover for me to go in there and play Little Miss Badass. We're gonna put you in the top of the elevator where it's nice and safe, and you'll basically keep up the pressure and the cold. I could see the gears turning in Anna's head, and it clicked. Temperature difference, and with someone constantly running the fog machine, it was a perfect way to get an ambush going. Where will you be, Caroline? I'm going to be up the stairs, so when the attention is focused on the elevator doors opening, I can rush in behind them and hopefully clear the rots out before anyone knows what the fuck is happening. Looking at my watch and realizing the clock is starting to wind down, it's likely time to go. All right, 6 potential rots in cloaks, a dork who could talk to the dead, and a death god coming in hot for the new year. What's not to love? I mean, realistically, this could go totally sideways, and the Earth gets plunged into a new dark age under a menacing death deity who hates everything with a pulse. Or we go upstairs, kick some supernatural ass, and get back in time to watch the lame New Year's Eve shows hosted by Carson Daly or whoever the fuck is doing it now. If I end up saving the world tonight, I am getting that sandwich from the cafe before I leave, no matter what. I mess with the thermostat and set it in such a way that things should be downright uncomfortable upstairs in just a few minutes. It's go time. Anna and I walk up to the elevators, and I pry off the top of the ceiling and lift this little girl onto the top of the box. She makes herself as comfortable as she possibly can, but she looks scared shitless, and I don't blame her. This kid has already gone through a lot. And this is the kind of shit that fucks you up for life. Ghoul School always had a way with lasting memories. My scary memory was the death of Dan and Lori. Anna isn't even done with her first few semesters here, so I can only imagine what else is going to happen to her. I sincerely hope she'll have an easier time after tonight. This is heavy and frankly apocalyptic, but she's holding it together. Anna, hit this with as much cold as you can muster. Keep pumping out the cold and absolutely flood the place with fog or whatever. As soon as the elevator doors open, and no matter what you hear until I say all clear, keep it up. I know this is scary and probably isn't the best plan, but I think it's got a solid chance. Okay, Caroline, I got it. I won't let you down. We can stop Gary and help everyone, right? Yeah, I mean, it's either that or we all die horribly. I don't think Anna appreciated my dark sense of humor. No, we'll be fine, kid. I trust you have my back, and it's not like I haven't faced my fair share of weird shit. I winked at her and hit the button for the 4th floor. The doors slid shut, and I sprinted towards the stairwell that led to the upper floors. Trying to be as sneaky as I could moving up the stairs, I didn't exactly wear the most appropriate footwear for an operation. However, sensible shoes be damned, I wanted to look hot. And cool. I also wanted to look cool. I knew this stairwell pretty well. I shared my first kiss with Lori in this place. She was so shy she trembled as I leaned in and kissed her. Okay, gotta get my head in the game. Slowly, I squeaked the door open an inch so that I could see into the hallway and assess the situation. I could see probably 12 kids, all aged from 10 to probably close to 18 or so, huddled around the doors lining the hallway. Like an execution line. This Gary was going to execute them, and likely soon. I looked down at my wristwatch, and Minnie Mouse looked back at me and said 11:57 p.m. The smell from the rots wafted into my nostrils and assaulted it hard. Death has an unmistakable scent, and I've been around it too many times since I became an agent. Putrefied bodies and liquefied organs and so much worse. The rots didn't have much in the way of their faces left. Unfortunately, it was just scraps of flesh clinging to their skeletal remnants. The eyes were no longer human, but burning balls of green light that hated everything it saw before them. "It is almost time. All shall be sacrificed for the glory of Yasu!" A yell came from behind a closed door at the end of the hallway's common room. Don't need to think too hard on who that was. Gary. Screams and yells of resistance from girls and boys, the sound of primal fear that death was coming and nothing short of a miracle could intervene. The elevator doors opened. 4th floor. The air snapped cold in an instant, and ice started forming all over the surfaces like a blast of Arctic air. Moisture froze and hung in the air. Even taking a breath hurt, as my lungs started to freeze up. Anna was not fucking around. This girl had something to prove, and she wasn't going to let fear or doubt get in her way. She was here to save her friends. She was here to save me, too. Throwing the door open like I was smashing through a brick wall, it was time to face down the legions of the undead. No real weapons, but that's perfectly fine. I am a weapon. Reaching into that dark part of myself that comes from my mother's vampiric side and letting the blood in my veins boil over, all remnants of restraint are off. I am going to unleash all the hell and darkness that is embedded in my very essence. Vampire abilities aren't always the same from one to another. We get enhanced strength, speed, and durability, but sometimes other special powers slip through. We can grow wings, claws that cut through a bank vault, and a bloodlust that rivals berserkers of ancient legend. I am moving so fast that time virtually stands still, and I can fully assess the situation before me. The rots are absolutely caught off guard and slowly turn their deceased skulls towards me. Too late. Closing the distance between the stairwell door and the first rot, I strike. This abomination of flesh and bone was mine for the taking. I hit. Hard. Bone craters underneath my foot as I collapse its chest into paste. This meat puppet explodes in a shower of blood and tattered bits of skin, and worse. It flies against the next closest rot, and it knocks it to the floor before it can touch one of the hostages lined up along the hallway. The sheer force of the impact shattered its skull and fragmented it into thousands of pieces. The kids shrieked in panic, but held their position on the floor. 2 rots down, 4 to go. Adrenaline filled my veins, and something deeper from my supernatural side fueled my speed. Snapping my hands at my sides, my vampiric claws extended from my fingers almost 6 inches, supernaturally hardened and ready to take down whatever stood in my way. I've only used my claws a few times, but I know it can cut through military spec armor if necessary. One of the rots slapped me across the face with its skeletal hand. I felt parts of my skin burn and tingle with the infusion of necrotic energy. This rot had moved just as fast as me and was intent on killing me, so I couldn't interfere with its master's plans. I wasn't prepared for the hit, and it stunned me for just a moment. The taste of death filled my mouth. This is what the grave must feel like as time itself eats your flesh. I instinctively grabbed at my face and the wound. I did it without even thinking. My vampiric ability would heal the wound shortly, but I could still die if I didn't get some distance. This was going to cost me my life. The rot was in my face and outreached its claws toward my throat. The first touch was a glancing blow. It wasn't enough to kill. If the undead creature managed to fully grab a hold of my windpipe, then it would use all of its death-fueled grasp to decay the very flesh from my body. I had no time to dodge or maneuver out of the way. It was way too close. I couldn't get enough room to swing my claws at it. Great. I'm going to die before I get a chance to even be assigned a proper field office. A high-powered gust of polar air rushed past the side of my face and knocked me forward and almost flat on my ass. I rolled into it as best I could and tried to regain some semblance of control. It wasn't pretty, but I caught myself before I was completely prone. Anna was right beside me, and her face was as unreadable as an Arctic glacier. Ice flowed from her outstretched hands in an ever-increasing frequency and tempo. The zombie-like creature that had wounded me was now coated in a thick, almost opaque sheet of ice. Unable to move from its frozen tomb, the creature fell to the floor and broke apart. This little powerhouse was done fucking around, and something deep within her had awakened. Anna was ready to throw down, and it seemed like she was going to fully embrace her gifts. I'd only really met her, and something had snapped in her. This was one of those moments that defines us here at Ghoul School. "You need to go. I've got this," the kid said with stern authority that I certainly didn't expect from her. The other rots had turned their attention towards Anna and seemed intent on her. A look of determination had set on the teenager's face. An aura of cold radiated off her, so intense that my eyes felt like they were going to freeze shut. The hallway filled with a blinding cloud of ice and snow, and you couldn't see more than a foot in front of your face. The kids screamed and the rots roared back in retaliation. I glanced at Anna, and she never stopped looking forward. "Caroline, go! Stop Gary! I'll handle this. Let me clear your path." This kid would be a great field agent when the time comes. Anna channeled whatever power she had and thrust her left hand forward in a dramatic gesture. The skeletal-like rots glared back at her and began to advance on our position in the hallway. A glowing sphere of blue energy crackled out from her outstretched hand. She closed her eyes, and a new look of concentration was on her face. The snowstorm in the hallway intensified, and wind whipped around us in a wild, howling storm. "Good luck, kid." I smiled at her and got myself ready to charge down the hallway. You could measure time in heartbeats for a moment. The 4 rots broke through the snowstorm and were right on top of us within seconds. This was it. The air completely changed, and for a second, it was as cold as the depths of outer space. It was like being hit in the face by liquid nitrogen. Cold doesn't even begin to describe it. I closed my eyes reflexively to protect myself. This really was it. The hallway was dead quiet. No one and nothing moved. I was perceptive of my own heartbeat, and for a second, that was it. I was alone. No, wait. There were more heartbeats, frightened but definitely there. I opened my eyes and saw the once vibrant colored hallway looking like the aftermath of a blizzard. I don't know what I expected to see when I started looking around, but I was pleasantly surprised. The rots were frozen in place in front of us. The undead creatures were completely turned into solid ice and utterly transmuted into something completely harmless. I reached out and pushed one of them. The touch burned my skin from the temperature difference. But they were, for all intents and purposes, dead. Whatever force of malevolence powered their undead forms was completely annihilated. The rots were destroyed and turned into ice sculptures right before us. "Anna?" a boy's voice called out, and it seemed almost hopeful. Then a few more voices called out as the snowstorm dissipated into a light flurry. Good. The hostages, as far as I can tell, are unharmed except for maybe some frostbite. Anna can take care of them. We still, Yasu, arise and come forth! Devour the unbelievers! Then blood-curdling screaming, the snapping of bone and flesh, and something indescribable. Gary. I didn't even have time to register that I was flying down the hallway at breakneck speed. My body was rushing forward towards a brightly decorated common room door. I threw my full body weight at it and crashed through and splintered it into pieces as it exploded from the force. Assaulting my senses is the pungent odor of death once again, but also cinnamon. This kid, Gary, is doubled over in a darkened corner of the room and clutching his midsection. He raises his head at me and looks at me with pure daggers and hatred in his beady eyes. The Christmas sweater is drenched in an unfamiliar substance. I couldn't make out much of his form beyond the garish sweater, but what little I could see, I didn't like. This wasn't human anymore. You dare enter Yasu's domain! The voice wasn't the same one I had heard in the hallway. This was distorted, warped. This voice wasn't the pimple-faced dorky teenager named Gary. Yasu had arrived. This horrific blend of flesh and horror stood up to an impossible height as skin sloughed off of their form. Limbs extended to an unnatural length, and what little of Gary's face was left distorted into a mess of tentacles and eyeballs from impossible places. This was a cosmic horror given form right before me. 12 a.m. No time for witty banter, no time for a strategy. Just me and them, tooth and claw. Me and them. No, I had one more weapon in my back pocket. One thing my mom had said to me before I left for Ghoul School. It was also the last time I ever saw my parents. Honey, you're a monster, but you don't have to act like one. You choose what that means. Today, I chose violence. I am a monster, and you will remember my name. I do fucking dare. I flew at this hybrid of Gary and this avatar of the death god Yasu. I extended my claws once again and bared my vampire fangs. Deep inside, I started to let go of all that I had kept in check for what seemed like forever. Gifted and supernatural abilities, and whatever else I had was being unleashed with this flurry of blows. I didn't have time for this to end any other way than Yasu dying, here and now. We got entangled and grappled with each other. Yasu was still bound by some of the limitations of the physical body they were inhabiting. I could use that to my advantage. I'm stronger, faster, and whatever this thing is, it hasn't fully transitioned to its full godly form. It's still vulnerable, and I can stop it. I have to stop it. Claws sunk deep into the creature, and it let out a cry of unnatural pain. I kept slashing and clawing with all that I had in me. Fluid of some kind started oozing out of the wounds. Yasu had weapons of their own, and they dug into me and drew blood. The wounds were deep. The burning pain was unbearable. But I had little choice but to press on with my attack. You will not stop me! Yasu's grave voice rattled in my ears, but it wasn't as brave as it was even moments before. Yasu drove a clawed appendage into an open wound on my chest and twisted it like a knife. I yelped out, but still kept fighting back with all I could muster. The death god plunged another attack into me, but made one vital mistake. Yasu left an opening for me to exploit due to Gary's body. He may be taller, but he didn't have my body weight. I threw all my weight into my next follow-up hit and knocked them to the ground and left them momentarily stunned. They didn't think I had much left in the tank, and on one hand, they weren't wrong. I'm about to do something I never wanted to do. I bared my fangs to their full length and bit down on the befouled neck of Yasu and started to bite. Draining the life from someone or something carries a heavy price that no one talks about outside of vampire circles. You take not just their life essence, but pieces of them, memories, fears, in a short piece of their soul, into your own. It's why a lot of vampires are crazy or are solitary loners. It drives you mad. It takes a toll that no mortal is prepared to deal with. Vampires like my mom were rare. She retained what made her human. I kept sucking blood and life from this horrific creature till it stopped twitching under me. I felt memories of Gary, abuse, bullying, and a lonely kid who saw his powers as a curse. I also had memories and pulses from Yasu, worship, prowess from untold places that gave power, and a bloodlust unlike anything I had ever experienced. After an eternity, it was over. Life had left the body, and it started to decompose before me. I shakily rose to my feet and watched the body melt into the carpeted floor of the common room. Within seconds, it was a puddle of fluids and bits of something I couldn't identify. The taste of blood lingered in my mouth. I don't know what happened next as the adrenaline left me and my claws disengaged and the energy in me dropped like a stone. I felt tears run down my face and all my emotions were all over the place. It was the resonance of the souls I had touched, mixed with my own. I had absorbed something alien. I had absorbed something beyond myself. I had taken lives before, but not like this. There was no bravado in this. There was something in this that felt different. I am different now, and I don't know what that means. I have to leave, but I've got to check on the kids and Anna to make sure things are okay. Am I going to be okay after all this? I could feel the edge of corruption from Gary and Yasu, but I pushed it down to the depths of my psyche to deal with at a later date. Still, a few things to wrap up before I can leave and also phone calls to make. Happy New Year, eh? The Department of Paranormal Resources came in and cleaned up the mess at the school. The feds sent the kids home until a more secure permanent residence could be assured. It won't take too long after all. Uncle Sam wants to keep a tight leash on his investments. I got chewed out by Director Carlson, but also congratulations on a job well done. I had managed to take down a significant paranormal threat without backup. I had lived up to the expectations of my training. I'm not sleeping particularly well after everything, but that's residual psychic resonance from Gary and Yasu. It should pass in a few more weeks, I hope. Carlson's team gave me a pass from the psychics, so I guess I'm good to go. My wounds have mostly healed, but I'll have a scar across my face from where the rot touched me. I think it makes me sexy in a weird way. The department has promoted me to a full agent, and I was to begin my new assignment in New York State before the end of February. I kept in touch with Anna via text. She was in good spirits after the incident. The kids she rescued looked at her in a whole new light now. They won't be calling her Slush anymore. She'll need a cool nickname or title when she graduates out of the program. I hope she has a better time than I did when I went through it all. I attended Sammy's funeral, but I didn't approach his parents or his partner, Franklin. It was a good service, but I kept to myself in the back. I put my hand on his casket and said my goodbyes, and then left as quietly as I came. I'm sorry I couldn't save you, but the kids you helped teach will be the next strong batch of heroes and agents that I'll work alongside. I think that's a pretty powerful legacy, if Anna is any indication of things to come from that graduating class. I hope they give him a memorial like they did for Dan and Lori on school grounds. Everyone who died deserves to be remembered for something. It'll be time to pack up my apartment soon and make my way to New York and see what happens next. I know that girl I was supposed to have a date with, Rianne, lives in New York City, so I'll call her and see if we can take a swing at this. The life of a supernaturally empowered troubleshooter isn't boring, that's for sure. And you know, after all of this, after facing life and death and consuming the blood of some creature beyond all human comprehension of evil, I never did get that damn tuna sandwich either. Hermit by Mike Mann. A small yellow-haired squirrel crept to the door of a rickety cottage set back in the deep, dark hollows of a wooded grove. Black slime covered its hind legs, and blood leaked from the side of its mouth. The exhausted animal collapsed on the porch, and the door opened to reveal an old woman. Her long gray hair reached her scrawny shoulders. Beads of stone and wood covered random strands, and twigs of healing trees were also present in her ancient locks. She looked down at the suffering creature. "Oh dear, no, this will not do." Her soft and rugged voice caused the squirrel's ears to perk up. She gently picked up the creature and brought it inside. She let it rest on a small area of a table, adorned with fabrics and sweet-smelling herbs. She set to work on something in the distance. A stone bowl was used to hold different objects that were ground up until it became a fine powder. A small glass vial was removed from a shelf. Several drops of green liquid were added to the concoction. Soon the powder became a paste that was used to cover the black sludge that infected the squirrel. A day later, the creature was restored, leaving the cottage feeling revived and grateful for the gracious human who had saved it. This was the kindred spirit of these woods, a woman dedicated to the art of magic, rooted deep in nature. She had practiced her ways of the ancients almost her entire life. The constant battle between light and dark magic had left a stain on her emotionally and physically. Her very soul could feel the living things all around her. Her sadness would bear tears pulled straight from her beating heart, and the tips of the woman's fingers held the mark of earlier dives into forbidden spells. Deep stains of jet black soaked the flesh and nails. Wisdom and knowledge graced the woman in scores of experience. This is perhaps why she would always find some animal crossing her path or stumble to her cottage in need. An unspoken understanding that this old hermit was the healer in this secluded realm. The woman stood outside and smoked from a wooden pipe as she watched the animal venture off back into the woods. She stood for a while, wondering what would have caused such an ailment. Something sparked within her mind as she pondered. She walked back inside and rummaged through a bookshelf until the proper tome was found. A thick book housed in a black leather cover, a red scar on the front made up of signs from a forgotten age. She opened it and flipped through the pages before landing on one with an illustration of tar-like creatures, monsters of various sizes composed of dark splotches, bright eyes, and teeth that one would pray never to be the victim of a gnarly bite. She clicked her teeth and exhaled deeply. No, it's way too soon. Her heart felt heavy, and worry took over her. She scrambled to a storage box and began digging through it. Where did I... Her sentence went unfinished as she continued her search. Finally, she found what she had been looking for. A small piece of amber attached to a thick strand of leather. A relic from one of her adventures long ago. The item came with a tragic story and a deep, jagged scar that remained hidden underneath her cloak. Countless sagas such as this had left her body frail and worn, but she never ceased to uphold her duty as it was given to her by the old gods. She had no time to reminisce on her past excursions at the moment as she went back to her book, scanning more pages as she flipped through them. Something bothered her, and she had to get answers. After some time passed, the old woman closed the book and headed out the door. She grabbed her decorative walking stick and trampled towards the woods. Something was off balance in her sanctuary, and the evidence was present with the arrival of the poor creature who desperately needed her help. The trip to her destination would not take long. She spied several peculiarities as she walked. Deep scratches on tree bark that left green goo oozing from the gashes. Trampled flowers that appeared to be sucked dry of their chlorophyll. Periodically, she would find tracks left behind by creatures she had not encountered, or at least not in her 95 years of living in these woods. Although she was 120 years old, she felt like she was 60. With all that time, she had seen many things and experienced even more. Encountered strange creatures, helped many, and even had written books documenting all of her discoveries. But the sights she had witnessed during this walk were new. However, the old leather-bound book passed down to her by her predecessor had details of things to come in the future. These new sights were connected to what she viewed in its pages. The black sludge found on the squirrel had been part of one of those countless premonitions in that ancient book. The woods seemed to be too quiet, leaving a dreadful stillness in the air. The woman felt uneasy, but had to continue. She knew where she was going and peered at the markers indicating she was on the right path. Gliding her hand across lavarus bushes and admiring the multitude of trees, she embraced the warmth of the twin suns behind her and the softness of the blue grass below. Her sanctuary had the grandest sights within the whole of Monriath. The woman couldn't be happier with her life and where she was. But something was wrong with the balance of nature, and what she found in her book sent depression down into her soul. That contentment and joy was being threatened by something, and she vowed to find it and stop it. This was her land, and she must protect it. Discovering the answer to her question was the sole purpose of this current adventure. She made it to a clearing and began seeing puddles of thick, black ichor, as if it had fallen from the sky. Ripped stalks of red fungi that dwelled within the ebony goo were present. Pockmarks littered the ground, showing many things scrambling about, digging claws into the dirt. A smell of decay mixed with copper was in the air, accompanied by a sting of something unfamiliar. Her steps continued forward, and she finally reached her destination. Upon arrival, the sight before her struck her heart. The woman fell to her knees and began to weep. "It can't be!" she wailed. Crimson tears fell from her eyes that landed on the desecrated ground. A large tree had been decimated. A cavernous hole was at its center, ridged edges that had crusted fluorescent flakes near more of those intimidating scratch marks. Streams of countless liquids had run out and dried from inside this beauty of nature. No leaves present, and the thing had the appearance of being torched. Coal encased the form, a sure sign of life. A circle of once luscious blue grass was tarnished and burned. Dried remnants of sick fluid surrounded the dead tree in a circle, and the skeletal remains of many creatures settled in it. Death had taken this very spot, something dark and cruel. The woman gripped her broken heart, struggling to regain her once calm posture. She rose to her feet, wiping her tears and regaining her composure. She pulled out the amber to examine the gruesome scene. Through the mystical item, she could see trails of colorful auras left behind from something that had burst from the tree. Faint blue with a fading haze of orange that rose like steam to reveal multiple paths of assorted-sized creatures. Almost like a shadow that stretched in the directions of these things and where they ran off to. Countless claws and feet that shot out in different directions, all making their way towards the woods. It started decades before it should, the old woman muttered to herself. She placed a hand on the corpse, still planted in the ground. Black stained fingertips traced emptied veins on the scorched wood. A sniffle and one solitary red tear fell from a weary eye. My heart shatters for thee, great protector. She turned and began to walk back from which she came. Preparations had to be made. Help must be found to stop what comes next. The woman walked and mumbled one word continuously under her breath. Magaladish, Magaladish. The word burned her tongue, and electricity sparked in her lungs as she uttered the moniker of something terrible. The culprit to the murder at the clearing. Back at the cabin, the old woman filled a bag with supplies, food, potions, and other items she may need. She set off to find some form of civilization in order to help combat the approaching doom that would soon come. Walking stick in hand, she set off on another long trek. Hope filled her, and it pushed back the pain and fear for the time being. Surely she could find a small group willing to volunteer in her quest. Time would tell if her efforts bore any fruit. 4 days of walking had exhausted her resources of nourishment, and the woman had sought the provisions given by nature. Vegetarian diet of fruits and berries, water given from the sparkling creeks. Animals passed by, some delighted with her presence, others rabid with an ominous gleam in their eye. The toxic black substance caked in the fur and feathers of innocent creatures. An infection was spreading within the realm of the animal kingdom. She tried to aid, but it was too late. They scurried away or showed their teeth. By day 5, she had to ward off many sick creatures. One ended with execution. She cried for ending its life, but it was either her or the animal. Seeing that people may not believe her, she removed the head of an infected lotus hound and placed it in her bag. Proof of the sickness that was growing like cancer. The infected red spots present in the dead animal's eyes, The black ichor had replaced any trace of its original fluid of blood. The task was ghastly, and a piece of her humanity left when the act was being done. The longer time passed, the heavier her heart felt, sinking deep with the stain of regret and sadness. Soon her nights were spent peering back into the eyes of something horrid. Inky silhouettes with glowing pupils, a stench of rotting meat surrounded her when they stalked the area where she camped. Clicking of jagged teeth and screams that sent other creatures fleeing in fear. The old woman kept the fire hot and bright in hopes it would ward off the monsters. It did, for the most part, and she remained unharmed. For added security, a small pouch of red albine salt was used to create a protective circle around her quarters. A few twigs laid out in specific sigils, but this did not ease her terror, and one morning she woke to find evidence of the things scrounging her campsite. The salt circle had been broken, and the gnawed twigs were accompanied by a pile of maggot-filled excrement near the now extinguished fire. She was being stalked, and yet the culprits had not killed her. She wondered if she was being toyed with. Luck fell in her direction by day 7, when she came upon a thick forest filled with barocton trees. A glimmer of hope began to burn inside of her. Nerves tensed up and her stomach filled with butterflies when she spotted structures beyond the trees. Cabins scattered throughout the area, and eventually, people could be seen. Some tending to small patches of crops, others working on the very walls of their homes. She heard the sound of children, then soon saw a line of 3 chasing one another. She had found a village, and hopefully some of its inhabitants would listen to her plea. She knew time was of the essence, so things needed to be done in haste. Emerging from the trees, she jogged towards the first person she saw and stopped them. "Please, sir, you must help me." The man pulled away and gave her a look of confusion and annoyance. He gazed at her and spit. The man turned and walked away without a word. She attempted this multiple times with almost the same reaction. She made her way through the place, and with frustration bubbling up, she began to yell, addressing everyone around her. "I beg of you, please help me!" Her eyes began to water, and her stomach churned. The eyes of the people all pointed in her direction. She continued her case, and all that she received were stares. "Omniveraat has fallen, the great protector of our land. The ancient tree has been decimated. Darkness and death approach all in Monorath." Her words fell upon ignorant ears, and she hoped her proof of the coming doom would show she wasn't crazy. She held up the sack with the infected hound's head. Black liquid seeped from a corner and dripped toward the ground. "The lands have been tainted along with the animals. The Malagdish have returned to reclaim this world. They must be stopped." Her throat began to ache from shouting. She told of what she saw in the book, the return of the demons who were once locked within the tree, the death and destruction that followed their release. She warned them of all the catastrophic events that would soon take place. Some called her crazy, while others backed away. Many scoffed at her warning of the day when the twin suns would burn away, leaving Monorath in darkness and allowing Magladish to murder and consume all who lived. Her body grew weak, and she fell to her knees in front of a large man dressed in black. She begged for help, but the man gave a blank expression. And with no warning, he attacked her, pummeling her worn face with his fist. The pain shot through her entire body as blood flew from her mouth and nose. Continuous strikes from the steel-like fist berated her face. The act was viewed by the entire crowd. None appraised it, but no one stopped it either. Soon the poor woman fell unconscious from the beating. With a painful gasp for air, the woman woke up. Lightning bolts of agony pierced her skull as she attempted to open her eyes. One was swollen, and no visibility came from it. She couldn't move. There was a struggle until the sensation of thick ropes around her arms and legs gave her the realization of her situation. Something stiff pushed against her back. She looked up to view the night sky. Shades of purple mixing with a stream of yellow. The stars burned brightly, and at that moment, she wished to be up there. She looked downwards to see the people of this village were all present. Looks of disgust and pity were shown by the light of the fire that illuminated their faces. She heard footsteps near her, and the man dressed in black appeared. He spoke to the crowd, giving a speech that ultimately painted her as a wicked, evil thing. He called her defiling names and claimed her to be associated with a name the woman had never heard of: Satan. The man scared her, and when she begged to be set free, he threw his fist into her face. She felt a crunch, and something hard shot out of her mouth. The old woman wept as she felt a hole where a tooth once was. Her heart thumped hard against her chest when she witnessed another man approach with a wooden cart full of stones. The man in black spoke again and let it be known that she would die tonight. Death by stoning for accusations of sacrilege and blasphemy. All the woman wanted was help, and she was given a salt for her efforts. Someone from the crowd walked towards the leader who had pronounced the woman's execution. The words were hushed, but she could make them out. "Pastor, I think this is wrong. She hasn't done anything. She's just a crazy old woman." The words did not please the man in black, because shortly after, he attacked the person. A large club was used to bash the person's skull. The poor soul begged for their life, but it did no good, and the final blow ended their life with a sickening crunch. A threat was given to the crowd for anyone else that wanted to interfere with the execution. No one spoke, and he walked a few paces back. This is when an avalanche of pain came crashing down on the poor old woman. Every single person grabbed a stone and threw them at her. Some hitting her torso, but most landed against her face. Her ears began to ring from the shots that pelted her. One caught her good eye and destroyed the orb. All was black, but the pain continued, followed by her cries. Blood poured from her eyes, mouth, and nose. The event lasted for minutes, but for the woman, it felt like an eternity. A loud crack reverberated inside of her head, and eventually, she died from this horrific display of hate. When her heart stopped and no breath drew from her lungs, she was cut down. Her battered corpse landed with a thud on the blood-stained ground. The crowd dispersed. A few individuals were ordered to bring her body inside the building that was set behind her. Later in the night, the man in black dragged the old woman's body down a declining set of stairs. His hand gripped her ankle while her head slammed against each step. Loud sounds of bone cracking and soft tissue expelling out of newly formed holes bounced off the stone walls. A disgusting trail of coagulated blood and brain matter leaked from her destroyed head and smeared across each step. The sounds continued until the man reached the last step, leading to a long hallway lit up with torches. After passing many hallways and cells, the man brought the body to a special room filled with different tables, tools, and a single chair. A large metal goblet sat on the seat of the ornate chair. A single stream of red pooled inside and gleamed from the light. In a slight effort of will and strength, the man slung the battered corpse onto a table. A few metal items fell and landed on the floor. He knelt down to pick them up, along with the sack he had taken from the dead woman. He had also kept her walking stick as a souvenir. The man opened the sack and removed the diseased head of the animal the old woman had taken for proof of her discoveries. He set it next to the metal tools and set to work. A whistling tune filled the air as the man removed flesh and muscle from the neck of the woman. Once that was finished, he gripped her spinal column with both hands and broke it. The effort was slightly easier than his usual victims, no doubt from the age of her body. He held the woman's head to his and kissed the now blackened lips. A kiss turned into a bite, and eventually his teeth removed the 2 lumps of flesh and began to chew on them. "Woman, your lips taste awful," he spoke before spitting towards the floor. The whistling returned as the man tossed one decapitated head and gripped another. With a needle and thread, a new head was sewn onto the woman's body. Black slime oozed from the nose of the hound and dripped onto the man's hand. He finished his work, then drew his attention to the substance. He sniffed it and gagged at the stench of something foul. Although the man wiped the sticky fluid on his trousers, a stain remained on his skin. It began to burn, and veins of purple slowly expanded around it. Panic took over him as he watched the area grow faster and faster until his entire arm was covered. The sensation of searing flesh covered his entire body within seconds. The infection was spreading and made its way into his eyes. Ice-cold streams of tears flooded out of the sides of his eyes. Stinging sensations nipped at his internal organs. His body shook and yellow sweat expelled from every pore. The man's mind emptied until all that remained was an urge to eat. His reddened vision spied the new form on the table, and he viciously gnawed at it. Wrinkled flesh and spoiled fluids filled his mouth. Wet slopping and crunching echoed within the walls of the room. The frenzy of hunger consumed every ounce of the man's attention until a sound came from far off in the distance. A voice resonated in the mutated ears of the thing that was once human. "Pastor Kane, are you down here?" The voice came from the door that led down to his dungeon. The voice returned, and the feasting stopped. The thing, dressed in black, walked toward the sound, its stomach gurgling with intense hunger. Fool's Hill by Bruce Haney. From a Missing in Oregon subforum of the Lost But Never Forgotten forum. Subject line: I solved my uncle's disappearance. Hey guys, long-time reader, first-time posting. I'm not an internet sleuth per se, but I did solve my uncle's disappearance. My name is Brenda, and my uncle was a small-time folklore author who wrote under the name R.H. Thurston. You might have heard of him, maybe because of his writing, but most likely because he went missing some time ago. I wanted to share the last thing he wrote for a couple of reasons. One, so people understand how he went missing. It's a bit of a cautionary tale. Two, so his fans can read it. I think he had fans anyway. At the time of his disappearance, he was calling this piece Fool's Hill. I received what he had written of it in an email after he went missing. So, here it is. Afterward, I'll explain how I solved this 100-year-plus Oregon mystery. Fool's Hill by R.H. Thurston. You, my friend, are on top of Fool's Hill, heading down the wrong side. That was a phrase that an old man told me when I was only halfway through the journey that got me into my current predicament. How right he had been, and that was probably the last moment that I could have stopped and changed my course and gone back up that figurative hill back to my normal, boring life. I should start at the beginning, but where is the beginning? What was that first piece of folklore that I got obsessed with? Was it Bloody Mary? I loved how everybody had their own version of that tale. For some, you just recited Bloody Mary 3 times in the mirror, while others had the crueler version of the myth and would have you repeat, "Bloody Mary, I got your baby." When I was a boy, my older sister told me that Bloody Mary had died in a car accident while pregnant on prom night. How many legends take place on prom night anyway? I could tell you a few, but my time is limited, so let's get into this. First, let me introduce myself. My name is Randy. I'm a writer of folklore. The name Randy doesn't give quite the impression one wants from a history book, so I publish under the name R.H. Thurston. I've spent years researching local legends. My first book was Haunted Cemeteries of the Pacific Northwest. I followed that up with ghosts and other spooky things in Portland, Oregon. My publisher is big on having a town name or region in the title. It was during the first book that I found that newspaper article in the digital archives that started me on this journey. It wasn't really a ghost story, so I added it to my bookmarks and didn't think much about it for a couple of years. That was until my second book was published and I found myself trying to find something new to write about. I still wanted it to be about the supernatural because that's where my interests are, but I felt like I needed to do something different than another book about ghosts. The original article was short, only a few lines in the community section of a 1919 issue of the Beaver Creek Herald. It read, "William Ivanhoe of Locust Grove, Oregon, must have got himself into a bad batch of moonshine. He claims that he saw a group of witches in the woods near here. Poor old fool, this isn't Salem, Massachusetts. This is Oregon." When I did a search for William Ivanhoe, I only found a couple of references in the papers. One was a brief mention. William Ivanhoe upset claims someone is stealing all of his crops. The last mention in the papers was from 1920. W.M. Ivanhoe, of here, found in woods, dead, missing right arm. Possible bobcat attack. For a while after this, I was at a dead end in my investigation. Where could I go from here? The man had been dead for 100+ years and I couldn't find much else. I found a little more life in the search when I got rid of his name and just searched the 2 keywords, witches and Locust Grove. Not a ton of hits, just 2. That original article and one more. Cattle farmer found strange carvings in trees near Locust Grove while clearing land for his cows to roam. Is this a sign of witches? Either way, more land equals more cows and hopefully a cut in price the next time you are buying meat at Moore End Meat Market. This article was from 1926, a few years after Ivanhoe had died. So it's another local that experienced whatever it was. Through my research skills, I was able to find out where the Ivanhoe property was, where the Moran meat market had been, as well as where Moran's farm had been located, so I made plans to take a trip out to investigate all three. Where Moran meat market used to be is now the Locust Grove Saloon. From the one photo I was able to find of the market, I believe it's still the original building. That's the great thing about those turn-of-the-century brick buildings. They never burn down and they never rot, so small towns use them forever. When I arrived, I asked a couple of locals if they had ever heard of any legends of witches in the area. The two I asked hadn't and didn't seem to care for my presence. Though I didn't feel welcome, I did decide to stick around long enough to have a beer and a club sandwich. Bar tip: always get the club sandwich. No matter how much of a dive you're at, and this was a dive, they don't seem to mess up on a club sandwich. How could they? Sometimes you get too much mayo, but is that all that bad? The club sandwich was excellent. The fries could have been better if they had changed their fry oil in the last decade or so. Word must have gotten around to the other daytime drinkers in the bar about my questions. An older man who looked and smelled like he'd been drinking since the night before sat next to me and said, "Buy me a shot and a beer and I'll tell you everything I know." Writing local history books is not the cash cow some might think it is. A beer and a shot are a hefty investment. I needed to consider this expense carefully. The gas getting out here and the club sandwich was more than I should have spent on this story already. "They aren't witches," he said, and then smiled at me. I could smell the cheap beer and the even cheaper whiskey on his breath. I decided I would go for it. I asked him what he drinks, and it was cheap, so I spent the money. I decided that if it was juicy information, I would buy him a good shot as well. He drank the shot as soon as the bartender set it down, then started sipping on the beer. I gave him a look to say, "Hey, you got what you wanted, now make with the details." He understood my nonverbal cue, and I took out my notebook. "What's your name?" "Bob Smith," he said, and then laughed. I wrote down the presumed alias anyway. "It's just people." I looked at him confused. "Okay, got it. Nothing supernatural?" I asked, trying not to sound too disappointed. "I wouldn't say that exactly," he said. "What would you say then?" I asked. "Let me tell you," he said. "Are they still around?" I asked him. "Just let me tell the story. Uninterrupted, all right? I'll lose track otherwise. Just let me ramble about my experience, take your notes, and ask me your dumb little questions after." "Okay," I said, thinking that he probably wasn't getting that extra shot now. He must have thought he was losing my interest because he did not bury the lead. "They killed my grandfather and my daughter," he said. I wrote down grandfather, daughter, and a question mark since I was told not to interrupt him. I would get their names later. "I lost my daughter when she was only 6 years old. I was young at that time, like you. How old are you? 25? 26? He asked. 33, I replied. "Well, I was 27 years old, and I wanted to show her my favorite trail from when I was a kid. The trail my father forbade me to take. I never knew why, it seemed safe enough, though I found it strange how well stamped down it was since I had never seen anyone else out there. The only sign of life before that day that I ever saw was an animal hide hanging from a rope years earlier. It might seem startling to you, but catching game and making rugs and such was more common then, and I thought nothing of it. That day was different. As we walked, we heard noises all around us. It was spring, so I told my daughter that it was just deer and small wildlife moving about." Bob stopped telling the story, and I could see tears forming in the corner of his eyes. He took a minute to compose himself and took another drink of his beer. I decided at that moment that I would get him that extra shot. "It happened so suddenly. I heard a loud noise and then somebody screaming. I looked over towards where the sounds came from, and there was this guy dressed in furs on top of a hill, waving his arms at me and making weird noises that were almost musical. Then he smiled at me, which scared me. I turned around from him for 1 second to look at my daughter, but she was gone. And when I looked back, so was he. Tears began to run down Bob's face. I signaled for the bartender and ordered him a second-tier shot of whiskey and another beer. The bartender obliged and said, "I think it's time you paid up and left." "What did I do?" I asked. She tipped her head towards Bob, then signaled for me to move towards the cash register, which I did, but I had no intention of leaving yet. Once away from him, she said, "Don't believe anything that man says to you. Everybody knows that he's the one that killed his daughter. He's just been spinning that tale for the last 40 years. She finished. "Okay, but why do I need to go?" I asked. She turned her head towards the back of the room. The men I had asked questions to earlier were sitting in a corner booth working themselves up. "I've seen this many times before. Once David and Brandon get worked up, there's no calming them down. For my sake, get out of here before it gets out of control. I don't need this today," she said. And then, like on a cue, the two guys got up. I gulped and started making my way to the exit. But they didn't approach me. They went to Bob. I handed my card to the waitress. She rang me up and I quickly signed it. I gave a 30% tip for warning me before I got my butt kicked. This was an expensive day of research. I was glad to get my card back into my wallet before things escalated. "Kid killer!" the bigger one yelled at the old man. "If you weren't so old, I would have kicked your ass long ago." The old man didn't respond. He just took his shot and drank his beer as fast as he could. "What do you have to say, kid killer?" the first guy asked. "To you? Nothing," Bob said, and then smashed his glass into the guy's face. The broken glass cut open the man's cheek and eyebrow. Before the second guy could respond, the old man kicked him in the knee as hard as he could. The guy fell and Bob jumped up and ran towards the door. I followed him outside. When I got outside, I saw the old man jump into an old Ford truck. I ran to him wanting to get the rest of the story, but he quickly started it and took off. I waved and tried to stop him. "Where can we meet? I want the rest of the story. What about your grandpa?" The old man stopped just long enough to roll down his manual window and said, "Forget about it. Leave here. You, my friend, are on top of Fool's Hill, heading down the wrong side." Then he drove off. I stood there, stunned until I heard the door of the bar open. "Damn," I muttered to myself, hoping I wasn't going to receive his beating. "Hey, come here," one of the two guys yelled. "Damn it," I muttered to myself as I could hear them walking towards me. Just before they got to me, a plan popped into my head. I turned around and spoke to them, matching their anger. "Where the heck is the closest bar? That kid killer said to meet him there," I lied. They both calmed down, and they told me where the bar was, and we made plans to meet him there and attack the old man. I let them lead and escaped on the first side road I could find. Crisis averted. My next destination was Moran's old farm. I wanted to see if he left any of those trees with the weird carvings up. It was now a nice, well-planned manufactured home with a forest and a large hill as its backdrop. I couldn't find any carvings. Moran either cut them all down for land for his cows to roam, or the developers did. My third and last stop was the land where the Ivanhoes had lived. The property wasn't far off from the former Moran property. It was on the opposite side of the woods in the large hill. The property was mostly vacant except for a small house that was rotting away. There were no signs of any farming or recent habitation on the property. The trees even looked like old growth, like somehow this area was skipped during the lumber boom of the early 20th century. While doing research, I'd never entered an abandoned house before, but this one was a few miles from anywhere, so I felt confident that I wouldn't get caught. Plus, the back door was missing, so it really couldn't be considered breaking and entering, could it? Probably. I'll have to check the laws before publication. Based on the carpet and furniture, no one had lived there since at least the 1970s. It was creepy in the house, but at least it was empty, which meant the chances of getting assaulted by locals were at a lower percentage here. I went through the house quickly as I didn't want to still be out there when it got dark. The first clue that I found in the house was a framed photograph of a family. Looking at it, I could see indents in the picture, like there was writing on the backside. So, I opened up the frame and took the picture out. I was in luck. On the back were the names of the people. I turned on the flashlight on my cell phone and held the photo in front of it. The names were written behind each person in the photo, so holding it up to the light revealed who was who. I was shocked. The names revealed that the young handsome man with the thick 70s-style mustache was Bob Smith. I can't believe that's not an alias. The woman next to him was only listed as Mrs. Smith. The other person in the photo, of course, a young girl, her name was listed as Gracie. Wow. What were the chances that Bob Smith would have lived in this house on the Ivanhoe property? With that, I took out my cell phone and snapped a picture of the front and back of the old photo, then switched to the internet browser so I could bring up the newspaper archives to do some light research. But of course, I was too far out from civilization and didn't get enough of a connection to even load the page. I only had 2 bars. I always wondered, why show any bars if it's not enough to connect or even make a call? Yeah! I heard coming from outside. I walked out but saw nothing. This would have been another good time to leave this path I was taking and head back down Fool's Hill. I listened for a while but heard nothing else, so I went back into the house to look around. Finding nothing else of interest, I made another foolish move and decided to check out the basement. I was only down there for a minute or two before I heard the door close. It was a dugout basement with a dirt floor. While I searched for another way out, I heard multiple footsteps walking through the house. I decided to keep quiet and hope that they would go away. I found no other exit, so all I could do was wait for whoever they were to come down here. The only potential weapon I found was an old 2x4 that was so worm-eaten it would probably break on the first swing. After a while, the sounds of footsteps ceased, so I made moves to escape. To my surprise, the door to the basement was locked, and I had to kick it down. They must have known I was down here. Why they didn't come down and get me, I don't know. Note, it is extremely hard to kick a door open when you're standing on a set of stairs. But I managed. As soon as I started kicking, I heard the screams, "Yeah!" But thankfully, they were in the distance. Once I was out of that house, I ran directly to my car, which of course had 4 flat tires. I still drove it and made it a mile before the tires were so shredded that my rims started throwing sparks from the damage. When I stopped, I could hear that they were following me with their "Yeah!" screams far in the distance. I checked my cell phone. Only 2 bars, so I continued on foot and headed to a place I had been before, that I recalled having a connection. I arrived at the Locust Grove Saloon 15 minutes later. I checked my phone. I had full bars. I peeked inside the saloon, and thankfully the 2 brutes from before were not there, and the other bartender's shift must have ended because there was a guy behind the counter now. I thought to myself, I'm okay. While I ate another club sandwich for my dinner and drank another beer, I contemplated my next move. Calling the cops wouldn't accomplish much. What would I say? While I was trespassing, my tires were slashed. I called my insurance to get my car picked up, but they wanted me to meet the driver there, and I had no interest in doing that, at least not tonight. I had just finished my sandwich when Bob Smith walked in. He didn't notice me as he sat down 2 stools over and ordered his drinks. "Hey, Bob," I said. "Still here? I thought you would have gotten yourself killed by now. You are one curious cat, and that curiosity, it's gonna get you killed," Bob laughed. "You love a good turn of phrase, don't you?" I asked. A nod as he took a sip of his beer was all the response I got. "There's something I don't get. You said they killed your grandpa. When was that? 1927. Years before I was even a gleam in my old man's eyes, Bob said. Okay, and then your daughter was when? I asked him. 1977. Bob told me. That's a 50-year gap. Do you really think it was the same people? I asked. Yes, Bob said. Then who was out there? I asked. Then I thought about it. It was you, wasn't it? You followed me out to your old house and locked me in the basement. Why? Just to mess with me? Bob grabbed his drinks and moved away from me. He gave me a sad little laugh, shook his head, and said, Mark Twain once said, "It is better to keep your mouth closed and let people think you are a fool than to open it and remove all doubt." I knew you were a fool before I even heard you open your mouth, Bob said. I had no comeback, and I was sick of him and his borrowed witticisms. I had thought he was a dumb yokel, but I'm the idiot. I was irritated and had no plan, so I began searching the newspaper archives on my phone for Bob Smith while I thought about my next move. I was too far out for an Uber or a Lyft or even an old-school taxi, and I was still too afraid to go sit in my broken-down car. Search for missing girl called off, read the first headline that I found. Subheadline, Mr. Smith's house searched, nothing found. I searched for a while longer but never discovered an article that stated she was ever found. She never was found, alive or dead. Then it hit me. How did Bob never figure it out? A few more searches and I was ready to approach Bob. I sat down next to him. Go away, Bob said. You're a fool, I told him. Yeah, he said and waved his hand at me. I have found references to these people or creatures for over 100 years. Your grandpa was killed nearly 100 years ago, right? Yeah, what are you getting at? Bob asked. You believe they're still out there, right? And you believe they're just people, right? I asked. Yeah, well, the man on the hill looked human to me, Bob said while looking into his drink. How many people have gone missing over the years? I asked. A few. Not a lot, but a noticeable amount, Bob replied. Mostly female, am I correct? Never found? I asked. Bob thought about it hard for a minute. Bodies have been found, mutilated, but those have all been men, Bob said. That is when it clicked in Bob's mind. They're reproducing. It's not the same people who killed his grandpa. Whoever is out there is a couple of generations removed. And they even add new blood to their gene pool from time to time. She's probably one of them, your daughter. She would be what? 52, Bob said, not even having to do the math. We plotted for a while after that, as Bob and I got quite friendly. The conversation ended that night with Bob telling me, well, I guess I got a shotgun. I gave him a questioning look. What did I say to you on our first meeting? Bob asked. That I was on top of Fool's Hill, heading down the other side, I replied. The wrong side. Well, wrong or right, I guess I'm riding shotgun with you on the way down, Bob said. Bob was nice enough to drive me back to my apartment. I did have to give him gas money and $20 for his time. Along the way, we made plans that in a couple of days, we were to head out to his old house and hunt them down, and maybe, just possibly, find his daughter. Over the next couple of days, I got my car towed. I had to buy new tires, of course, but I also had to buy new wheels, since I drove on them like the fool that I am. But I was glad to have those couple of days away from that town because I realized that my curiosity for this story was not as strong as my will to live. So, I made a decision not to pursue it any further. I called Bob to tell him that I was putting on the brakes. I was turning around and heading back up Fool's Hill and back to safety. Except, he didn't answer my call. I left a message and then decided to just stop thinking about it and move on to other things. To Brenda, my niece, if you've read this far, this means I didn't return from my trip. I set up this document to auto-email to you 5 days after I left. That means if you've received this email, I'm probably dead. A few days ago, someone tried to get into my apartment. I believe it's the people from the woods, from that town that I had visited. So that was the last I heard from my uncle. I don't know what he was thinking. He believed there were strange woods people that had been killing locals for over 100 years, and he went out there on his own without a weapon. Why? Because Bob Smith disappeared and someone tried to break into his apartment? There was a simple solution all along. Did you know there really is a Fool's Hill? Yeah, Bob was only being slightly clever when he referenced it. So, this is what happened, and then I'll tell you how I solved this 100-plus-year-old problem. Just like my uncle, I can do research and put 2 and 2 together. It's actually a hobby of mine. Other than lurking on web sleuth message boards, I'm also really into those subscription box mysteries. I'm subscribed to a few of them. So, this is what I believe happened using those skills and my conversations with the police. Randy began to get worried since he hadn't heard from Bob Smith in a few days, and he'd heard someone outside his door the night before. He planned to try and figure out where Bob lived, which he was able to do easily enough. Then he packed a bag with supplies and snacks, including a book on witchcraft for whatever reason. These items were found by the police. That's how I know that he brought them. He then drove over to Bob's house. This we know because he left a note on Bob's door. It read, "Hey Bob, if you get this, I've been trying to get a hold of you. Call me. I'm heading to the house." Which he did. He traveled to that house and then most likely entered the woods behind the place. Or they dragged him there. No blood was found around the house, so he probably went of his own accord. Once he entered the woods, he would have started up an incline. Yes, you guessed it. He was heading up the literal Fool's Hill. It was named after this swindler in the 1860s who hid a little gold and a lot of fool's gold around the hill in a scheme to sell the land off to the highest bidder. At some point, they found my uncle's car. It was driven and parked outside of the saloon where he first met Bob. This story would have ended there with my uncle and Bob missing like many others, but like I said, I did some research, found out that Fool's Hill was a real place, then thought, fuck it. I took a chance, lied to the cops, and told them drug manufacturers were operating up on Fool's Hill. The police must have believed me too, because 10 of them headed right up that hill. They found no drugs, but they did find chunks of Bob and my uncle hanging from trees over a burning woodpile. They were smoking the meat to cure it for the winter. The people up there were feral, but were easily taken into custody as they had no real weapons but wooden clubs and old knives they had stolen. They're now all captured and going through the system. There were females in this tribe of lost humanity, but none of them seemed to be the right age to have been Bob's daughter. There's now a new legend out there that Gracie is still in those woods. She's allegedly picking up where the others had left off and is looking to rebuild her family. Or so the legend goes.
Well, my spookies, if you're still with us, then congratulations. You survived the woods. You survived the school. You survived the hill. More or less. Tonight we met the kind of horror that does not stay politely in one little box. It crawls through fantasy and folklore, through government secrets and New Year's nightmares, through missing person message boards, old newspaper clippings, and villages that mistake cruelty for righteousness. And isn't that the real fun of a show like this? 1 minute you're worried about dark magic bleeding through the trees. The next, you're watching a supernatural disaster unfold under fluorescent school lights. Then suddenly you're in a dive bar, eating a club sandwich, trying to decide whether the old drunk telling you a century-old cannibal legend is crazy or the only sane person in town. That's how these things get you. Not all at once, not with thunder and lightning. They start with a weird sound in the distance, a sick animal on the porch, a friend who calls when they should be celebrating, a newspaper clipping that's too strange to ignore, a local who says, "Don't go up there." And naturally, because human beings are basically horror movie raccoons, but with car keys, we head up there. We follow the trail, we open the door, we read the forbidden book. We walk into the woods and tell ourselves it's just folklore. But folklore is just a warning that learned how to survive. So tonight, before you head off to bed, maybe don't look too long out the window. Maybe don't answer if something calls from the trees, and if an old stranger tells you that you're standing on top of Fool's Hill, heading down the wrong side. For once in your life, listen. Until next time, stay creepy, my spookies.